Thank you for staying with us on Citizen Extra. We're bringing you news as it happens across the country. We want to take you straight to Eldoret now, where the body of the late Cabinet Minister Nicholas Biwott has arrived ahead of his burial. President Uhuru Kenyatta will be momentarily suspending his campaigns to attend that burial. John Wanyama joins us now with an update. John.
Thank you very much, and I'm at Eldoret airstrip here, where the plane carrying the remains of former powerful minister Nicholas Biwott has touched down here in the airstrip. And as you remember, the former minister died last week, and we are expecting that he will be buried tomorrow in his home at a place called Tot in Ikeyo. And if I can just talk to his personal his personal assistant, just to tell us maybe what are the plans for tomorrow. If you can tell us what are the plans for tomorrow.
We've just landed. We are going to Kaptarakwa Tot for the people to come and see the body. Tomorrow is burial. His Excellency will be coming to mourn with us. That's all that I can say.
Thank you. And if my cameraman can just show you what is happening here. This is the van that is going to carry the remains of the late Nicholas Biwott, and we are still following up on this story, and we'll come to you once we get the information. And on behalf of Royal Media Services, and we are really praying that God give them strength to handle this hard moment they are facing today. Back to you, Anne.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so of course tomorrow we will be following up on that report on Citizen Extra and as it happens. But Bishop Mark Kariuki is still with us in studio. And Bishop, let me just come to you to the extent that we've seen some very high-profile deaths in just a span of weeks, and it's puzzling. What are your thoughts on that?
I didn't get the question, please.
We've seen high-profile deaths of high-profile politicians just a few weeks to the election. What are your thoughts on that?
I think from my understanding of the scriptures, in Deuteronomy 29:29, it says, "The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the revealed are ours." It is revealed that it is appointed once for a man to die, but it is not revealed when, how, and where. So when somebody dies, it is their time that has come to die. We cannot associate it with the elections or with other things that have come, because it's secret. It's only God who understands the times. Yeah,
the reason why I ask is because, you know, in the previous hour we've just talked about witches and their involvement in this election. So I'm going there, having had the leeway to do that in the previous hour, and the fact that we are, of course, still a society that is still rooted deeply in culture, and there is a perception out there that when it comes to around election time, bizarre things happen. As a preacher, how do you approach that topic with congregants who may still have their traditional or cultural views?
I think the life of an individual is in the hands of God, not in the hands of the culture, not in the hands of other people or what other people may say. Although we know that words have power, but we hold it that the life of an individual cannot come out until God has decided this is the time for this individual to come home. So we've got to educate ourselves and realize that we are in the hands of God, and it is God who decides on life and not man.
All right. Let's move on now, and we're talking about the church's concerns in the elections and the concerns of other groups that are observing this election. Joining our panel this hour is Regina Opondo. She's the chairperson of ELOG, the Election Observation Group, and good morning to you. What are your observations so far in terms of how IEBC is, is well on its way to carry out this election? Do you believe they are prepared? And your general observations of political actors as we get close to the election.
Okay, good morning, and thank you for welcoming me this morning. As ELOG, we've had observers out in the field, long-term observers, since March, so we've been monitoring several things. including voter education, voter registration, the party primaries, and the mass voter registration, amongst many other activities that are involved in the election process. And in speaking to the preparedness of IEBC, I think it's always good to remember that with the last IEBC, I think we were not as far ahead as we were with this IEBC. So there are some things that they are doing well in terms of timelines, despite the challenges that they faced with the last-minute changes in the law, the changes in the commissioners, etc. So there are some areas they're doing relatively well. But some of the areas that we're concerned about, I think, and we've monitored consistently, is around the provision of voter education, which has been consistently low. It peaked during voter verification to about 80% of the country was covered. Initially it was around 30%, it was less than 50% of the country was covered. Then it went up to 80% and then dropped down to around 56% at the end of June. So voter education, we've not been doing very well from the side of IEBC. I think we've engaged with them and they've promised to improve. Our concern is that it might be too late to do something significant in terms of voter education. But we've also monitored other actors doing work around voter education. So civil society and the media have also been doing a little bit better than IEBC, but we understand that they're there to complement and support. So they've also peaked and gone down in the same periods. The other issues that are of concern are around issues of violence, which I think have been talked about consistently, and intimidation. In particular, I want to mention the issue of violence against women, persons with disability, and young people, which we've also seen increasing, we've seen consistently, and particularly verbal abuse towards women, which has been around 31 to 38% from March up to now. And I think 31 to 38% is still too high for any section of the society. So it means there's concerns and there should be serious effort put into security, not just for these marginalized groups, but therefore for everybody else. In some areas, violence has also manifested itself in a way that has prevented people from registering to vote, and they're also not sure if they will manage to vote on the actual day. So it might end up disenfranchising a couple of Kenyans, and that's one thing we're concerned about. Linked with that, we've also noted some activity around recruitment and arming of militia groups, but that is at around 5% of the country. And we've at least shared whatever information we have with various agencies. We hope that they're doing something about it. They tell us that they're doing something about it. But on the issue of voter bribery and inducements, I mean, that's been consistent and it seems to be getting higher. It's peaked during political party primaries. Went down a little bit, but during campaign seems to be going back up again, and it's across the board. So most of the big political parties are guilty.
Okay. Let me question you on that, Regina, because there is the unsaid, I don't want to call it a rule, but there is a kind of talk that goes around this time of elections, where you will hear people saying, take the money, but nowhere to vote. And it's almost becoming culturally accepted that if a politician wants to dish out money, hey, fine, okay, we'll take your money, but we'll know where we will vote elsewhere. How do you speak to that? Is it still then inducement? Is the public complicit in it?
I think where the law is clear, the law is clear. We can make excuses and say we'll take the money and vote the other way, but taking the money also makes you complicit in a certain way. And it's good that we have Bishop here because he can speak to the morality and the ethical issues around that. Where the law it cannot clearly catch people, I mean, there are things we need to speak about our values as Kenyans.
Right.
So the best situation would be don't take the money, don't tolerate it, report it, but make good decisions based on the qualities of the person you're picking. The reality of it.
I am. Because we saw the gentleman in Embakasi East giving people unga. In these days of scarcity of unga, who's going to come with free unga and people look at you and tell you, we won't take your unga, we know where we are going to vote. Yeah. It would be lovely, it's best case scenario, but it is unlikely to happen. And I like what Regina has said. It has to do with our values. As Kenyans, we talk a big game. But when the rubber meets the road, we ourselves are as guilty as the politicians. Because unless there is somebody to take, the giver will have nothing to do if there's nobody to take. But we Kenyans are just as corrupt as our leaders. And so sometimes when we throw stones at them, we really ought to look at ourselves as well, because we facilitate, we expect it. You'll hear people talking, for example, of something like, huyo mheshimiwa hatujamsikia. It's not that they have no ears to hear. They have not been feeling his effect. So we Kenyans also should look at our values and be honest. We are just as complicit as the politicians are in this vote buying scenario. We are just as complicit.
Joy, I was told somewhere that the reason why we cannot elect you into an office is because you are watching it. It's actually now called listening allowance, sitting allowance, and I'm telling you, I hear what Regina is saying in terms of what the law says. But the law does not exist in a vacuum. And actually even tell you, one of the reasons why some of the politicians have a lot of leverage and leeway in churches is because what they give. I can tell you, one politician gets into a church, looks into the building and says that unaona ile roof tutamaliza hiyo, and that means resources. And then I know of a politician who has come up with a very good program whereby they actually move from one church to another, doing what you call tunataka kuvalisha pastor. So they have a very good program where they buy a suit for the pastor together with their his best man and the wife. As in, you can imagine that actually is manipulation, and the problem is that we have really we have culturally leaders or people who are better endowed than others, so that in the times of disasters and problem, people would run to them. Now that has been used through the money to be able to facilitate people. I can tell you, if politicians would actually tell you the truth. One of them told me at 4 a.m. in the morning, people are talking outside his house, and they know actually even where his bedroom is, where they would talk next to the window, so that he's aware they are there. And that is the reality of our political culture, and if we do not confront it, I can tell you, these things we are talking about, fighting corruption, good institutions, because those who are racketeers and who are the corrupt, they invest in politicians, so that when they get into power, what happens? Their business are facilitated. I can tell you, Anne, if you want to know who funded who in this election, and both sides of the political divide, just wait for when they are forming governments, look whom they will appoint to the following ministries. The ministries of defense, the ministries of infrastructure, because that is where a lot of the monies and the kickbacks go back. So, as in, I appreciate what ELOG and observers are doing, but if we really want to deal and fight with corruption, we have to address head-on the issue of campaign financing.
I think we need to let our people know that there is a big joy, there's a fulfillment in you when you tell somebody, I do not want your money. It gives you a fulfillment. You feel dignified when somebody comes to give you money and you say, no, I don't need your money. But to get there, you've got to know who you are. You have got to appreciate who you are. And I think this is what is missing with many Kenyans, that we are out for handouts. Give me this, if I can get this, if I can get this, and competition in our midst, and trying to identify ourselves with the possessions that we have. So if we can get to a point where we say, I am satisfied with what I have, I will run with what I have, and have the confidence to tell our politicians, no. I've been talking to the pastors, and I've been telling the pastors, don't allow yourself to be bribed with 14 mabatis or 20 bags of cement. A politician has not come to your church for 20 years or for a whole year, 5 years. Then he comes and says, I'm going to give you cement. You are called by God, Bwana. When you know you are called by God, you will look at the 10 bags of cement and say, I don't need the cement. I don't need the mabatis. I will preach, because we as pastors have also a certain degree to blame, where we bring them in with an aim of getting some material to build the church, because we want my church to be like somebody else's. But if you are able to stand and say, no, I believe in God, I was called by God, my pulpit is not for politics, it's for the word of God, we will change this nation.
Regina, let me come back to you, there's certain points you've spoken of that we'll get into detail very quickly, but before then, you know, there have been claims by civil society in particular, and I know you're an election observer, but many times there is the perception that when observer missions are, begin their work, that the first port of call in terms of consultation is civil society, and that is the respect in which I bring them up. And there is a section that have alleged that, you know, in terms of preparedness, that IEBC has not given the, the alternative to the possibility of technology failure, and that is an issue. Is that your understanding of what IEBC has said or done, to the extent that they say the complementary, system would be manual?
Well, what we have advised them and what we've requested for them, even on behalf of observers and on behalf of citizens groups, because we sit there as citizens' eyes, is that there's talk of the complementary mechanism. Now, what we don't know is what this complementary mechanism looks like. In various forums, they explain what it looks like, but it would be good to have a written document that somebody can make reference to. This document can be put on the website. It can be subject of voter education, so that we're all very clear that when the BVR kits fail, because there is a complementary mechanism for identification when you get to the polling station, and then there should be a complementary mechanism for transmission, because transmission failed last time. So that when you get to the polling station and BVR fails, I know it's predictable. So if the process is predictable, then you have more confidence, you know what's going to happen, you're less likely to question. Remember, we are in a period where there's a lot of suspicion, there's a lot of mistrust, just coming from the previous electoral experiences. So the more information that is provided, and in all formats, so it's good that they speak about it, but we would like to see something written, something that we can make reference to. And so I do agree to a certain extent with civil society actors, also as a civil society actor, that we need something that we can reference. So what was explained, and now I'm explaining, I might not explain it correctly,
right,
is from a forum yesterday where the CEO was present. And they said that for transmission, for example,
right,
what they've put in place is that they're working with all service providers of the networks,
right,
so the Airtel, Telcom, etc., so that you get as much coverage as possible. They're also mapping the country to identify the areas where there is no coverage. So for the areas where there will be no coverage, the backup plan is satellite. So you're still talking about technology. Where that is not there, then they have to think about what is the next step. Now this, I know because I was in a forum yesterday, but how many people know this? So it would be good to have that clarity, and even how I'm explaining it might not be correct.
I think it seems pretty accurate, because I mean, we've hosted them on various occasions, and they've said basically the same thing, and that, you know, if satellite phones don't work, then you just go purely manual. And the reason why I'm really drilling on this is whether or not civil society and observer groups are in a veiled way saying that they do not accept a manual system as a complementary mechanism.
Not to speak for everybody else, but I think from where we sit is that whatever the system is, provide enough information. Don't come in and just explain it on Citizen. A Citizen has wide coverage, which is very good, but not everybody has access to Citizen. So have it in as many formats as possible, so everybody has access and everybody's clear. Political parties
accept the manual system as a complementary system?
It is.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Yeah.
I think everybody else is saying it is. And
That
it is. Don't give leakage. Come on now. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm saying, I think we need to be bold and courageous as a people. The truth of the matter is that a manual backup is part of the complementary process. Remember, one of the principles of the electoral process is that it should be a simple process. All we need to know is that the security of that manual process, but the reality of it, the manual process is also part of the complementary mechanism of ensuring that we have a free, fair, credible, and an election that actually we can trust.
Right. But we all need to be aware of that system, and so that it's not a shock. You know, once it becomes a shock, from chronology to manual on the day without the information, that's what creates problems. Which is why I'm emphasizing that they must make sure that information is out, people are clear on what the process is, so that this is step 1, step 2, step 3.
I don't speak for IEBC. I think, but for me, if I was asked, I think IEBC technically is ready for an election. The only problem is that politically they are not, and that needs to be very clear to the commissioners, that they are not only leading a technical body, they are also leading a political body.
But so the a political question or a technical question?
It's a political question, and I can tell you why IEBC is now on the fore is because it has been very difficult, and we talked about it in this program, that the organizing question for this election has been very elusive. There was a UNGA at some point, the negative ethnicity or inclusivity. Now you can see it has been oscillating. I am not sure even if, for example, next week IEBC demonstrates that everything is okay, which should be their responsibility. By the way, it is the right to a free and fair election is not a privilege IEBC is giving us. It is a responsibility.
But Vincent, sorry, just hold your thought. I have a question or a concern with what you're saying. The question of which system is going to be used in the event of electronic failure is not a political question. That is a technical question.
Yes.
Right. And so to the extent that ELOG concedes that it must be a manual system that is in place, their concern really is that there should be a document substantiate and say step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. If I'm hearing you correctly, Regina, is that your issue, that you accept it will be a manual process, but that process needs to be laid out by some sort of policy document or something like that?
Yeah, so we need to know, okay, so if we talk about identification and you go to the polling station and let's say BVR doesn't, you put in your fingerprint and your picture doesn't come up, what is the next step? That kind of information needs to be provided, and in the simplest form for citizens, because we're talking about citizens' access to information. So yes, it needs to be in a document, it needs to be a subject for voter education, and we've already raised concerns about the low levels of voter education, and if they're ramping up voter education, those are some of the things that we should be clear about. So, and there are various steps around the technology by the time you're getting to manual. So remember, it's not just manual immediately.
Right,
because we've talked about several steps of technology before you get to the manual,
right.
And that needs to be clear and accessible for everybody, so that if the process is predictable, there's more confidence in the process, and then you're less likely to have concerns about credibility of the process.
Joy,
there's one thing that I also want to point out. We are not doing this vis-a-vis what we did in 2007. We actually learned from it and came to 2013. So what we are building on is the successes that we had with the Isaac Hassan Commission. And we have moved away from that time. For example, we had a Form 16A in the Kivuitu days, right? And what the returning officer used to do, the Form 16A, is that he would fill out manually for as many agents as he had. He would fill it out and give it to you. And what that used to do is he would have one Form 16A and the agents would have something different. But if I understand correctly, even with the manual backup, one of the things that the IEBC is trying to do is to ensure that what we have is carbon copies, so that even what the agents have is exactly what the IEBC officer, the returning officer, is going to have. The thing I would like to see parties concentrating on, and the players in the political field, is ensuring that their own observers and their own party agents are empowered with as much information as possible. Because I'll tell you something, it's good if Wanjiku has all this information, but Wanjiku is going to come vote and go back and do her business. The person who needs to know what is going on are the party observers and the party agents. That is where I would be putting my emphasis on, because you can keep IEBC in court until August the 7th, and even the 8th, if your people don't know what to look out for, then at the end of the day, it will not benefit you as a political party to defend your position the way they call it, to defend your vote. You'll not be able to have people to defend your vote. So we need to also, as political players in this field, take some responsibility for what needs to be done. For example, the voter register, our people need to have, in our political party secretariat, we need to have that audit going on ourselves. Whether or not the IEBC does it, we should be able to take that responsibility. So at the end of the day, we have enough information to defend our position. So it would be, in my opinion, we are not learning from 2007. We've already moved on. 2013 had mistakes but was also very good. Now let's build from there, rather than always referencing 2007. I mean, as Kenyans, we've moved on from there, and we need to acknowledge we've made some strides.
All right, and I thank you all for your views. We're taking a short break, and Citizen Extra, we're back with more news as it happens. Stay with us.